Housing Opportunities Report, and I was invited to participate in that. That was, last week or so. And one of the things that came out of that is Housing and Human Services would like to work with land use on brainstorming on what CB12's response, might be. And I think that makes, a lot of sense, and wanted to get feedback from the committee members. The Borough President's Office, confirmed that the plan does not have an exhaustive list of all possible and reasonable, sites that could possibly develop. So the efforts that we've undertaken to identify, other sites and, develop a list and provide to them is something they absolutely look forward to us doing. We can and should focus on the unique needs of housing in Washington Heights and Inwood. So we can look at the lots for development. We can discuss the kind of, housing that we need. I mean, do we need more senior housing? Do we need more supportive housing? So, I mean, that's all part of, the brainstorming effort. And, at the last meeting, we discussed, defining affordability in a way that, makes sense. We've talked about that in a number of meetings. That's also something that Housing and Human Services is very, 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 focused on. And so it just seems that there's, a lot of, benefit for this topic for land use and Housing and Human Services to, take some time to work on it together. And one of the ideas is for us to, of course, have one or more joint meetings to discuss it. But in addition to that, to host not so much a town hall, more of a workshop, so that, we can engage community residents and, have, more detailed, personalized discussions of what it means, what's going on, and to get that input and to have that input, fed into whatever it is we generate in terms of a resolution, to, the borough president. So, wanted to get your, committee's sense of, obviously, working with Housing and Human Services, and your thoughts on, well, let me begin with that. Tanya, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, I think that's a good idea to work with housing, as that definitely has a lot to do with them as well. But didn't I say that we should have a town hall or some sort of thing regarding with the community about explaining this plan?
They're saying the same thing.
Good. I'm glad they're on the same page, that we should definitely do that. Because like I said, it's a lot of things that, just everybody is clear on what this is, and understand the language and understand what the implications are for the community. Yeah, and I definitely second that, and I definitely support doing something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's more, I mean, going back to what Mark Levine charged us with, at his January State of the Borough, it's more than what are the implications for the community. It's for the community to shape what the plan looks like. Other comments from committee members on that? You all can't be shy and silent. Come on now. Vivian.
I just hope that we can balance contextual housing as well as the housing need, because the housing need is strong, and one would hope still that what gets built is contextual.
Yeah, well, I mean, once again, land use, I mean, that's the reason why I think, it makes sense. And that's the question on the table, for instead of having, land use looking at planning and zoning and related items on one side, and Housing and Human Services, looking at, types of housing and housing need on the other side, we're one community board. And actually, if you look at CB9, land use, housing, zoning is one committee. So the idea is, let's put our heads together and talk about contextual, density, affordability, seniors, supportive. I mean, we've worked together in the past to bring ideas from different committees into a single resolution. So for something where the idea is to look at a plan that has the intent of setting a roadmap for developing housing, it would think that, you know, the two committees, it's a natural fit. Jim.
Thank you. I just want to push, you know, that most of what we will probably want fits into the contextual mode that Vivian was talking about, and inherent in that and the limited building heights is the fact that it also limits the density. We actually are remarkably undense as far as many communities go. And I think that works to our advantage. And I think we would like to preserve that. And I believe the best vehicle for that is this contextual, you know, zoning, because it limits building heights, and therefore it actually limits the population of the buildings as well.
Yeah, but, you know, I think once again, the two things, the question on the table is, you know, moving forward, working on this with Housing and Human Services. But just to be clear, and we all have the zoning handbook, there are many different contextual zoning categories. And we went through a little bit of this when we were talking sometime last year about the R8 section of Lower Washington Heights. And we looked at maybe half a dozen different contextual districts, some of which we thought were appropriate and some of which we thought, you know, were not a good fit for that area. The reality is there, you know, contextual has height limits, yes, but depending upon which contextual, you know, it has different height limits. So, I mean, if we're looking at, you know, the city as a whole, you might have contextual districts that have higher maximum heights than we would say is appropriate for our neighborhood, which is not to say they're still not contextual. So it varies, and we just be, you know, mindful of what contextual can do. It's not as limited as that.
Oh, just to be more specific, the contextual I'm talking about is contextual with the kind of numbers we have. So there's a contextual version of, you know, R7, whatever it's called.
Yeah, and that's reflected
I mean,
actually in the plan.
Right, but that's what I mean. We want things contextual, not with 59th Street, contextual with what we have up here.
Yeah, so I will get to that later because that's one of my concerns, but it's related to something else.
Thank you.
Other committee members, your thoughts on working with our, you know, fellow, you know, is there?
Well, I am in favor of that. I forgot to say that. I think working together is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, is there any objection to us, you know, working with Housing and Human Services on this? I mean, if not, I mean, we will certainly try to make, you know, plans for, you know, when, you know, to do that. And I think we need to put our heads together and pick a good date, time, and venue for the workshop. And that the workshop probably should be in person. It makes it easier to have more informal conversations that if we want to do, you know, sketches or, you know, other things, but we need a large enough venue that people feel comfortable doing it and being there. We need a large enough venue that has good ventilation. So that's part of the planning, you know, that we would do. I mentioned there was also, you know, something, you know, Jim was mentioning contextual, like from Midtown. In looking at the plan, there are some sites on Broadway from 155th maybe up to 158 where, you know, in the plan, the proposed zoning is either C62 or C63. And maybe an hour and a half or so ago, I emailed to the committee members some reference information on that. And those commercial proposed, and at this juncture, remember it's proposed, so we are going to comment on that, gives you an equivalent, you know, floor area ratio or density of, you know, R8, which is, you know, what we have. And, you know, we could say whether it should be contextual or not, but looking more closely at what the type of uses that a C62 or C63 it seems to be something that's more appropriate for more of a business district. And I think what, the plan was trying to achieve is like along Broadway to allow for a more, diverse mixture of uses. But I think maybe that can be achieved another way. Maybe it should continue to be a residential, underlying zoning with a commercial overlay, the same way that you have like, retail overlays. And that commercial overlay would allow, ground floor retail and maybe even second floor commercials, because we have in that area, Planet Fitness and other things that are on the second floor on Broadway. So just a residential zoning with a retail overlay would not allow that to happen, but there are commercial overlays that would allow something to happen on the second floor, and that would be perfectly appropriate along, Broadway. So I don't have necessarily an issue with the density that those proposed commercial districts, would allow, but getting into some of the detail of the types of uses, I think, we need to fine tune, what can, happen there, because once again, the zoning it's not a development plan. It will not, make anything happen, but presumably if it went forward and zoned it C6 to a C6-3, someone might come along and do a more intensely commercial building. And if the intention is to increase housing, then I think we need to focus on zoning that's going to be more focused on housing and allow for, on an avenue like Broadway, opportunities for retail and commercial. Anthony, I see your hand up.
Yeah, and I think along the same lines, one area that I was particularly concerned with respect to the rezoning plan of Southern Washington Heights was 158th Street. So I know you're mentioning Broadway, but there's also a piece of 158th off Broadway. So between where 9I begins and then
going down the hill.
Exactly. In that particular area, I can't imagine really being developed into a business district or having the types of uses particular to what you're describing. I think, well, one, there's no parking in that area. So I'm not exactly sure what that would look like if a developer were to come and take advantage of the zoning as you're saying, and then try and develop something more commercial. So thinking about it with that respect, I know Broadway is a little bit more commercial and has a little bit more of a business vibe to it, but
a lot
158th Street, I'm sorry.
A lot more.
A lot more, exactly. But
Yeah.
158th in particular starts to take you more into that residential area of Audubon. And I just can't imagine that developing.
It's completely resident. I think that's the Safety City site, which, we've looked at and, advocated for in the past, for housing development, but not for, any kind of commercial. And that's a site that's directly adjacent to the West 158th Street row houses, which we talked, a lot about, and it would be neighboring River Terrace, which is, another, residential development. So, I mean, once again, we need to tweak that. Having commercial in that area, you're right, just doesn't make sense.
Well, if I could just add one more comment, it would also abut my building, which is 779 Riverside. So just thinking about that.
Yeah. The point is it's a residential area and commercial just doesn't seem to make sense.
Definitely.
So anything, and I also think I forwarded to the committee members some additional sites that I came across just walking on Broadway a few weeks ago. I think there are 3 corner sites, I think 172nd, 73rd, and 74th on the east side of the street. They all happen to have 1-story commercial structures, Rite Aid or stuff like that. And once again, even under current zoning, you could, if just look at the scale of Broadway, you could have an apartment building with ground floor retail as opposed to just a 1-story retail building. I mean, so those are sites that, can be, looked at, which is not to say every single site is going to be a development project. And once again, if we can say every single site should be a development project, but they're not going to all happen, at once. It's a function of, when is their interest to do that, and also when is their ability to do that. It takes time and money to develop anything, but I think this is part of our laying out for the borough president other opportunities we see, and as they point out, we know the neighborhood better than they do, so it's up to us to point out, you know, other opportunities. Anything else concerning the borough president's housing plan? If not, I see we are joined by, and very happy to have Councilmember Carmen De La Rosa. Carmen, would you like to say anything before we get further into the agenda? You're muted.
Hi, Wayne. Hi, to everyone on the committee. Well, I'm listening in on the borough president's report back on the borough president's plan. I'm too looking through it and noticing some of the opportunities that are there. I want to remind folks also that the council lines have changed, and so after the November election, I will represent from 155th Street up. And so if you live in that area, from 155th to about 159 on the east side of Broadway, Sean was your council member. I will be your council member, hopefully after the elections. And so on that note, but I know that there was some other items, Wayne, that we were going to discuss today. I'm not sure if this is the opportunity or we'll get to them later.
Yeah, so just to be clear, so your district is going to be both sides of Broadway from all up to 159th, or how is that?
Only the east side of Broadway. Sean is going to retain Riverside Drive from about 162nd Street down.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're on the east side, and then you go
Exactly.
up.
Up, all the way up. Yes.
Okay. What we're going to work with both of you because, quite frankly, you know, we need to make sure the entire community is considered. So
Absolutely. We have
can't get away from us.
No, we have a close working relationship. So I look forward to coming around the table and having the conversations about infrastructure and opportunities that exist there. I also know that Cloth is working on a bid that might also have an impact on this area. And so, you know, I think there's some overlapping conversations happening at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, Cloth has been working on a sort of a lower Broadway, Washington Heights bid for some time. And I think they came one property owner short of making a successful run of it last time. So they're working on that, you know, once again. Okay, so for the next agenda item, we had requested in March, but it got rescheduled to April because of a change in BSA schedule, to get an update on the development proposal for 2238 Cumming Street. And we have representatives of that team with us. So who is going to take the lead on that?
I will. Richard Bass speaking.
Okay, so Richard Bass, why don't you introduce your team members and, you know, walk us through, you know, what the modifications are. And my understanding is BSA will have a hearing on this somewhere in the middle of this month.
The 24th or the 25th. They haven't told us which day yet.
Okay.
So I'm joined by my colleague, Frank St. Jacques, who's a senior counsel with my law firm. I'm also joined by my client, Brian Burwell and Dan Haran. I'm going to briefly go through the application where we're at right now. So technically, this is a BSA variance application known as 2021-41BZ for 2238 Cumming Street in Manhattan, block 2237, lots 16 and 18. we're going to be at our third hearing at the BSA. It's scheduled the 24th and 25th. They're still doing everything remotely, so they'll let us know, I think, a few days beforehand, and they'll let you all know too. We will be submitting the revised application later this week. The BSA will forward it to your committee and community board early next week. Since we last met, the application has undergone significant changes. We've lost the 9th floor. We increased the parking. So right now it's a proposal for an 8-story building, 121 units. The zoning square footage permitted on the site is about 100,000 square feet, but the proposal is for 89,000 and change. We're seeking 3 relief requests. One for the base height, so we're asking for 4 feet 4 inches. After the setback, we're also asking for 9 feet 8 inches for maximum height. The total number of parking spaces, we're seeking reduction of 12. This is different than when we last were before your committee, when we were seeking a total relief from parking. At the request of the BSA, we've changed the facade so it's more brick. The windows reflect windows in the area. We've taken out the dormers, so it's more of a flat facade, as you're seeing in this picture. I can walk you through the
quick question. Is that 8 stories measured from the sidewalk level?
No, it's from the base height.
And so where does the base height begin?
The base height begins at the top of the rock.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My wife accuses me of shouting, and I'm never sure if I'm speaking loud enough. Frank, do you want to we'll scroll through the plans? So this is what the plan looks like. We're having.
Is it possible to enlarge that a bit?
Oh, Frank, you're the best. Because of the rock outcropping, which stopped this site from being developed while the entire neighborhood was developed, we're building on top of the rock. We're putting in parking, 49 parking spaces, and we're putting in stackers, so we'll have attended parking. The first floor will primarily be the parking and entrance to the building, and then we'll have 7 floors of residential. Next slide. And this is looking south at the facade oncoming. You can see the church on the left. The change in the design is the BSA asked us to cantilever over the entrance to the church. Frank, can you just show on the cursor with your cursor where that is? So we created a cantilever there, which allowed us to bring the height of the building down. We also lost a couple units that way. And because staying in the 8-story configuration, we're not building out the total zoning entitlements of the zoning lot.
So that was also one of the things that BSA wanted you to do, to stay within an 8-story height?
They felt an 8-story height was more appropriate because the R7A allows for an 8-story building.
Mm-hmm.
And again, their suggestions were, we sharpened our pencils. The chair's suggestion of the cantilever and one of the other members suggesting losing the dormers would give a building form that better fit the neighborhood. We thought those were good suggestions and we took them up. Next slide. So we're looking at the building looking west, and the shaded dotted area is the church. For this purpose, we removed the church so you can see what the parking would look like on the base level, and then the 7 stories of residential. Now, in keeping with the R7A zoning and in keeping with the neighborhood, we have a base of 6 stories, and we set back and then go up to the 8 stories. Next slide. This is the looking north of the building. You can see the church to the right, to the east, and that hatched area is the parking on the base. Next slide. And then this gives you a composite of how the building would fit in with the neighborhood. The picture on the bottom is looking westward. As we discussed previously, and I know there are some new members, so I'll give a little bit of background. The entire neighborhood was built out in the early part of the last century, except for this site, and is primarily because of the rock outcropping. The hardship inherent is digging that rock outcropping out completely to bring it down to the sidewalk would make the project infeasible, and our economic analysis shows that. But this is what the building design looks like with the changes, with the cantilever, with the holding the corner. You can see how we match the building to our south, and how we match the buildings to on the north side of Cumming. Next slide. And I see a question. Yes, GF 55 is still the architect of record. Do you have questions about the variance, the site plan, the BSA process?
If you could just summarize for us, and I think also for a couple of newer members, what the project looked like before in terms of building height and number of parking spaces in particular, and what BSA asked for to get us to where we are now.
The previous application was a 9-story building. So we were seeking a height variance along with the base height. And we also, because we're in a transit zone, and because we were trying to eliminate blasting the rock or chipping away the rock, we proposed no parking. The BSA was adamant about providing parking. Our environmental consultant did an analysis that there would be a certain amount of demand, which is less than what the zoning required. We're above that demand. And as you know from the neighborhood, none of the buildings that were developed in the teens and 20s in the 1900s have parking. So, and those buildings didn't have the rock outcropping, could blast back in those days. We can't do any of those things now. So the BSA wanted more parking. We provided the parking, and they wanted the height of the building reduced to 8 stories.
And so that's, an 8-story building, and the buildings in the area are typically 5 or 6 stories?
Primarily 5 and 6.
Committee members, questions, additional information, particularly, for newer members, anything additional you want to know? I see OC's hand.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it was discussed already. I just joined. What's the total height in feet for the building?
It's 89 and 8 inches. And permitted is 80.
Okay. And the height of the buildings, the surrounding buildings?
They range from 60 to 70 feet.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, that was basically, you know, my point, you know, before that it's an 8-story building. On the other hand, it's not a 9 or a 12 story building. Jim Berlin.
Thank you. And I'm not an architect, but I, you know, see buildings all the time. I actually find your building very nice to look at. And you know, the cantilever actually, because of its functionality and such, makes it very interesting. And you know, you did lower the height. The problem that I have, and the facts may have changed, several months ago, we received more detailed plans, I believe. And the garage, as it was configured then, there was actually a plan of the, or whatever you call it when you look from above. There was this diagram of the garage, but the way it was set up, it would need to have an attendant, and the specification was that there would not be an attendant because, for, you know, if there's a car on top of the stack, you have to move all the other cars out and lower that car, and so and you know, customers can't do that. So now it may be that I misinterpreted your plans, and maybe the plans have changed, but the arrangement that I saw with these stacks, basically, you know, chock-a-block next to one another, I don't believe that's workable without an attendant. Thank you.
No, we would, you know, stackers require an attendant. So if we confused you, I apologize for that. But no, we don't want parkers, tenants to manipulate stackers. They would have.
That is a frightening thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Absolutely. If we could go back to the question that OC and I raised differently, the 88 feet and 8 inches, is that measured from the sidewalk once again, or is that measured from the plane created at the top of the rock?
Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's from the top of the rock.
That's correct. It's measured from the base plane, which is the standard plane from which height is measured in the underzoning.
So then what is the height if you're standing at the sidewalk?
I can pull that up if you just bear with me for a moment, but it's I mean, the rock is approximately 18 to 20 feet tall, and slightly higher. Just bear with me and I'll look that up.
Chair, maybe while he's grabbing that information, can we address some of the questions that are in the chat?
Actually, I was going to say that, but the next person is Daniel.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have much to say. I think it's a really nice building. I'm pretty sure it probably takes a lot of work to redesign the building and to bring down the height and all that stuff. By any chance, do you have, just for visual reference, a comparison of what you guys had before compared to now?
I can share with you, Daniel, for that matter, Anthony. I think we have the prior presentation from last year. And, you know, this is something that, you know, Catherine does really well, and I did not do it. But, you know, the purpose of having chat enabled is not to have a separate meeting going on, you know, via chat. Typically, we use it to drop, you know, information in, links and things of that nature. But, you know, just to be clear and address some of it, the Board of Standards and Appeals process exists and has existed since New York City instituted zoning in 1916 or whenever it was, to deal with hardships or, sites where you cannot fully comply with zoning for whatever reason. And my understanding that was done for legal reasons to, protect against someone saying there was a taking of personal property. I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is the two are linked for that reason. So whether we had a rezoning, a few years ago, or whether we haven't rezoned since the 1960s, any development project, any building can apply for, reconsideration of things under the Board of Standards and Appeals process. So having a recent rezoning is not, it does not eliminate the ability of someone to say, I need relief. It is up to the board itself to see whether or not, I think there are, 3 or more, criteria that the project must meet. And if they don't feel it meets it, they, as they've done here, they can go back and say, change this, change that, whatever. But I just want to make it clear that the BSA process is not something that gets overridden if you've had a recent rezoning, and it's not tied to whether there's contextual zoning or not. It's whether or not there are hardships, for lack of a better word, that cannot be fully accommodated under the existing zoning. And the development team will have to, and I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not wrong. The development team has to make the case. So, Richard and Artemis and everyone else, they have to make the case to the board that the requested variances are justified, and the board has to decide whether they agree or whether they don't agree, with the case that is being made.
That's a very
Jim, I think that's an old hand. I think, Anthony, you are next.
Yeah, I would like to raise a question that was brought up in the chat. So what efforts were taken by the development company to discuss these plans with the community aside from attending community board meetings? Because according to some of these comments, there wasn't really much communication with the nearby community.
That's correct. We have not done that communication.
So there have been no types of public events or anything to discuss with the community?
No. On a variance application, it's pretty straightforward. We have to meet 5 findings. We believe we have. We're only now submitting our revised application, and that's why we're coming before the community board.
I believe the board also requested, actually, our contact with BSA confirmed that although it is not required, they did request you to do what you're doing now, come back to the community board and present the revised plan. So
we would have done that without being requested. And by the way, I forgot to thank you for moving the meeting to tonight so I could attend. And I know some of your board members were going to miss the meeting because of tomorrow night's holiday.
We have a pretty good turnout. I think we have almost everyone. So moving it really didn't hurt anything. And quite frankly, if the revised information was no longer due to BSA in March, then you wouldn't have had much to show us at the beginning of March. So it made sense to wait until we had something to show us.
But again, we appreciate your flexibility.
You are quite welcome. Steve Simon.
Yes, I guess I have 3 questions. Is there a diagram that would show this building in context with the other buildings in the immediate neighborhood?
Frank, can you go back to, I think, the last slide?
And make it a little bigger. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, particularly the bottom one.
Well, is this the only one that you have?
That's the only one we have.
Yeah. Well, I was looking for something that would maybe show the rest of Seaman Avenue and other buildings. So what is the answer to the I don't know that this is a very good perspective, but what was the answer to the question as to the true height of the building from the sidewalk level? It's if you're saying that the rock is about 2 stories tall, so does that make the true height of the building more like 10 stories?
No, so the base plane calculation varies, and the plans we submit to the BSA and the community board will receive sometime next week. We're finalizing them now. Has a diagram showing how the base plane is calculated, but it ranges because of the level of the rock ranges from about 10 to about 14 feet. So if you're measuring from the sidewalk, the height of the building from the sidewalk, which is again not how building height is measured pursuant to zoning, would be about 10 to 14 feet higher than the measured height.
Right, but the actual impact upon the members of the public or people walking along the street would be that the effective height of the building would really maybe be but be 9 stories. As opposed to
could we just go back to that?
As opposed to the neighboring 5 or 6.
Well, Steve, actually, as you walk down the street, because it has a contextual base, one wouldn't be able to perceive the height, the ultimate height of the additional 2 stories. So the whole point of contextuality is that the pedestrian experience is similar. So the height of our street wall for the base is similar to the buildings on the north side of Cumming.
Yeah, could you go back to the presentation? There were a couple slides where you showed, the elevation and showed the setback. I think. Keep going. Yeah, I mean the prior slide.
That one?
Keep going. Yeah. So show us the street, then show us the street wall, and show us the setback. I mean, just with the cursor.
So where the cursor was, that's the street. Frank, you take it.
So this is looking at the south end of the building. So the street is on the right-hand side of the screen.
Okay.
The adjacent 5-story building, the line for that building is sort of roughly here. This is the northern edge of the church.
Right. So if you're at the street, your street wall is.
Which street are we on? Are we on Cumming?
We're on Cumming.
Yeah. So this on the right-hand side of the screen would be Cumming.
Right.
So it's Cumming facing Seaman, I think, right?
Right. That's correct.
I'm just trying to get you to better illustrate what you were talking about relative to the setback. So, I just wanted you to, as you were showing that you're at the street, it goes up to a certain height along the street, then it sets back. That's what I wanted you to outline for everyone.
Go back to that slide that was showing the shadow of the church. That one. Frank, can you just put your cursor on the setback?
Sure.
So at that point, we're at 64 feet, and normally that's permitted 60 feet. And then we have the setback of 15 feet, which will then, go up to the additional 2 stories. So someone walking down the street would not perceive the part of the building that's above the setback. You would be experiencing 2 street walls of about the same height.
Okay, thank you. I think the next person.
My last question.
Steve, you do not get to ask endless questions.
Just one last question. Is this building 100% market rate?
It is, because under 421A doesn't exist. There's no mechanism to provide affordable housing. And to do affordable housing voluntarily, the BSA has had case law that's a self-created hardship because you're reducing the income towards the building.
Oh my God.
So you could not go to HPD or HDC or HFA because BSA would say that you're creating a financial hardship?
Right. It's a little obtuse in terms of the logic. We're hopeful, based on what we're hearing out of Albany, that 421A will come back in some form.
Yeah, I was going to say that in addition to 421A coming back, that is something, and I'm glad Carmen is on the line. I think something that city and state officials, might want to take a look at how the law, affects that, because we often will say, I've said it myself, why don't you go to HPD and get XYZ program? But if one city agency is going to say, if you do that, you're creating a self-inflicted financial hardship, that's working against, all of the intention of, like Mark is saying, trying to increase the amount of affordable housing. So that's something we need to look at, because I don't think it quite makes sense.
Right. In a rezoning, we would have the opportunity to go to HPD. In a variance application, it's shooting ourselves in the foot and the head.
Yep. OC.
Yes. Okay.
Actually, I'm sorry. OC, you already asked. Let me go to Vivian first.
I was just going to say that even if the height is thought of as contextual, the width is just like totally out of anything else there. I think one's used to walking down the street and seeing sort of changes in buildings, and it's overbearing in its width and in the facade. I don't know if there is a way to control that. The way there is.
Vivian, there actually is. If that's a concern of the community board, we can have the architect look at creating more vertical lines in the facade treatment.
Well, I was going to say that, contextual zoning doesn't control the width, but the architectural design can in fact pick up the rhythm of the street so that, it doesn't feel as monolithic.
Vivian, we'll look at that. It's a good suggestion.
Tanya.
Yes. Firstly, I'm just really disappointed about the everything being market rate, though I'm not surprised because this is the direction that we're going. This community that part of the community is going to look like 116th Street in Harlem, rest in peace, and not so many years. My question is, when you all went before our Housing and Human Services Committee, didn't they ask you all about you going to the community and having a discussion with them about these plans?
We've only been before your committee once and the full board once. We didn't go before any other committees.
You didn't go before? Were you asked to go before the Housing and Human Services Committee?
No, we went before the Land Use Committee. We went before this committee. And we had a unanimous vote at this committee on the first vote. Right,
because my issue is that I know that this was brought up with us, is that, for you all to come before to have this discussion with the community about the impact of this development. It's one thing to come to us, but please understand, we are merely representatives of the community. Okay, we are not replacements for the community. This is just because we can't have, of course, everybody on the community board, but we are merely representatives. So we really, for me, it's just two things that are striking. It's like the no market, everything is being market rate, and then you all not having a conversation with the community and thinking that that's okay. I don't understand. Like, even though you say it's not necessary because of the, whatever BSA is requiring or whatever it is at my end, it is a necessity because it shows that you all are concerned about and thinking about the needs of this community. And by not doing that, it makes me feel that there is not that concern about the needs of the community because that has just been dismissed. And so I'm very concerned about that. And that should have been done. I really don't want to have any further conversation until that's done. That's me. But I don't speak for the rest of this community. But for me, I don't want to have any more conversation until I'm done personally. Until that's done, I really don't want to hear anything else.
Yeah.
Because I think that's very important. And the last thing, this is just a house clean thing, because people have been mentioning it. But is there a reason that we're doing webinars instead of a regular meeting? Because our community members are not being able to. It's a difference between the way we used to have it and the way we have it now with the webinar. It's a different look than it is when we used to have the meeting where people could see us and see who's talking, and they had more mechanisms to community. So I'm just asking, I know you don't have to answer now, but as chair, if maybe inquire about that, because I noticed that we switched to webinar format as well, and it's just been really.
Well, we've been doing this same format since March of 2020. So we didn't switch formats.
As a webinar, though?
When you say, you mean how the invitation comes? That I don't know. I don't know how they switched that. Remember, that doesn't come from me. That comes from
understand. Oh, yeah, I totally understand. I was just been putting it out there so you and Cher can inquire about it, because, it's not,
Excuse me.
Hello?
It's always been a webinar, always.
No, but what, please, what Tanya is pointing out is the way the invitations come through now, they've changed it, and I don't quite know what was done, but we can look into that. Let's not obsess over that.
No problem. Thank you. I'd like just responses to what I said. Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate it.
And OC, is that an old hand or a new hand?
Oh, that's a new hand.
Okay.
Okay, so I have 2 points. One, if you walk down Seaman, if you walk south, you can see the setback from Beek Street, from the corner of Beek and Seaman, is you can continue because you go downhill. That's why you can see all of that. So I think it's inaccurate to say that you will not see the setback. So again, if you walk from Seaman south, you will be able to see it. My question in regards to the heating system, considering local law 97, what is the plan? How is the building going to be heated for the winter? Are you going electric? Are you going natural gas? How is this building going to pass 2030 in terms of local law 97?
2040.
No, 2030. I know I'm going for 2030. I see what you're saying, Wayne, but I'm going for 2030 for a reason.
Brian, do you have an answer for that?
At this point, we just have the architectural and mapping plans. We can't really develop the other building plans and systems until we have this finalized, and then then we'll move on to all the other building systems, mechanical, sprinkler, etc.
And BSA is not going to opine on the building systems, although the building department will to some extent, but obviously if you are putting up a building in 2023, 2024, and what OC is pointing to, and this also relates to an upcoming agenda item, local 97, all of the energy benchmarking and carbon reduction, obviously you're thinking about what kind of systems, what kind of building envelope you're going to move forward with, so you don't have to start doing retrofits on a 5 or 6 year old building. So what have you been thinking of? What has the architect been thinking of?
To be honest, we haven't gotten there yet. And OC, I understand your question. This is a question is coming up on all my projects across the city. The only thing I can say is if we get approval at the BSA, we'll delve into that and we'll come back to the community board and let you know.
Okay, it's just that my point here is that natural gas is not going to cut it in 2030. And in 2026, natural gas is going away. You're not going to get approval for natural gas. So I wonder, what are you going to do? If going to be like, but just for you to think about for next time you come in for us to present is like, what is the next and best, heating system you are planning for this building?
I appreciate the question. We'll get back to you.
The other thing for the community board to think about, and I've mentioned this several times, is, we have all of these, local laws that, I mean, for example, electrification of new buildings. And I keep asking, who is working closely with Con Ed to ensure that we have a grid that can actually take the electrification of, all of these buildings. I mean, when we had to move years ago from, like number 6 oil to 4 or 2, and many buildings went to gas, Con Ed's infrastructure for gas was completely inadequate, and buildings such as mine had to pay $250,000 for Con Ed to upgrade the infrastructure in the street. And there was a nursing home in Harlem that ultimately didn't do it because it was going to cost them $600,000 to pull new gas lines from like 3.5 blocks away. So, the laws are being passed, but what's being done so that the infrastructure is beefed up so that the law makes sense. And we need, as a community board, need to be looking at that as well.
Yes, I agree.
Jim?
Thank you. First, I just want to reiterate my understanding of what Tanya was talking about, or reiterate what I said. These things have always been webinars. That's how they work. But in fact, the format of the emails we have been getting has changed significantly. So if that's the issue, then that is what I've observed that as well. But these things have always been webinars. Now, getting back to the OC's point, I would guess that by the time this building is ready to be constructed, they will no longer be allowing gas hookups for new buildings. And that means whatever heats the building will have to be electric. And the odds are that, that if they're paying attention, this will probably be done by heat pumps. But that's just what I think will happen. But obviously, this is something that, they're going to have to look at. And of course, the whole essence there is once we have enough renewable electricity, then electricity will be purely green and the building will automatically become green just because it's electric. Thank you.
Back to Tanya.
Yes, Wayne, it will not be anything crazy. Can I share my screen? I just want to show our resolution, the last resolve of the resolution we passed about this development.
Why don't you just read it?
Okay, I'll do that. So the last resolve, the community board 12 Manhattan urges the developer to ensure that site safety measures required by the Department of Buildings are strictly maintained and continue to coordinate closely with residents of neighboring buildings as the project progresses. So we have always said about this development that we want you all to coordinate and to discuss with the community. We said that in the resolution that only partially supported this based on many stipulations. And I urge you to look at that again and to do what it is that we have requested you all to do in regards to this particular project. I just don't feel it's fair that we're here voting on something or trying to, provide support or not, or whatever it is for something where you all had not done your due diligence in that way. Once that's done, I think it's finally appropriate to come back but until that is, I just don't feel that would be fair.
Tanya, again, the statement you just read deals with site safety. Site safety means construction. If we get the permission to develop this site, we will coordinate with the neighbors of the site all site safety questions. That's what that resolution states.
Right. So, I mean, just not to belabor the point, but I think what Tanya is pointing out is the spirit of the resolution, speaks to, outreach, communication, and coordination. And obviously, when we were discussing this a year ago, there was a lot of concern because we all know that if you're going to do any kind of, rock removal or even just construction on the rock, the vibrations will impact the adjacent buildings. And there were people who, expressed concern about that. So, that was one aspect of it, but also given the comments that were raised, by some people who attended the initial land use meeting, and as you know, things that are coming up, the extent to which, there was, more informal communication outside of what is, required by BSA was also what we were, getting at, so that, folks would know that if it was a 10-story building, it's now an 8-story building. If there was no parking and now there are 46 or 50 spots, so that there is some level of communication. There's nothing we can do at this juncture to go back and undo the communication that didn't happen, but the spirit and the intent of that was for it to be something, a more open process so that people understood what was going on. And just, for history, and this cuts both ways. The church itself met with land use many times, and this is at the same time the inward rezoning was being discussed, so we knew about development plans for this site for a year and a half before anything even happened. And anyone who says they're surprised by it would simply, they were not, coming to the land use meetings. But, there was a level of openness and a level of communication that was established. But once we got into the development project, that communication, went away, and that's really unfortunate. And once again, the church was not in charge of the development process, but, the relationship that they established, I mean, they were commended, for that. There were no surprises. Even part of the inward rezoning, and this is why I say it cuts both ways. We knew that building on top of Manhattan schist is not easy. So they were asked whether or not the site should be carved out of the rezoning. And I believe we asked that, and the borough president's office asked that. And they said, no, they will go along with, the site being, included. And I don't know what was the, what were the behind the scenes discussions. I don't know if anyone promised to assist them financially or whatever, but, the church went along with not having the site, carved out of that. And so now we are here, the site is included. And in order to once again build on, story and a half of Manhattan schist, it doesn't quite fit into zoning, hence they're going to BSA. But there's a lot of history here. And I just wanted to mention that because sometimes we collectively remember part, but not the whole story.
And dealing with churches and rezonings, a lot of them don't truly understand the impacts. The rezoning actually reduced their zoning entitlement.
Oh no, we pointed that out to them, that it was taking away development rights from them by keeping it in the rezone area. So that's why I say they went along with, whomever convinced them to do that, because, we specifically, said that, under the old zoning, you could build X, under the contextual zoning, you could build Y, which is only a problem because your site is like this only site in the area that is primarily composed of Manhattan schist. Anthony, back to you.
So being one of the newer members to this committee, and this was raised a couple of times in the chat, but can you in the most specific terms explain what the hardship is that you're raising with BSA?
The hardship to do what's, an as of right normal development would be to remove all the rock, not only down to the sidewalk, but 1 story below, so there would be a basement and parking. The expense of removing that rock is so prohibitive that there would be no development. That's why there's 5 findings, and the first finding is a unique physical hardship that the applicant didn't create. We didn't put the rock there. So removing that rock is extremely expensive, would take over a year to remove, and would be a major disruption to the neighborhood. In the old days, 100 years ago, labor was cheaper and you could blast. You can't do either of those 2 things today. So that's the unique physical hardship.
Thank you.
Daniel?
I have a quick question, and I wonder if it's like a thing that's through all like new buildings. Are new buildings required to have solar panels on top of their roof? And this like kind of like goes back like to the whole energy thing.
I would imagine if it made sense, we will have solar panels. Honestly, that hasn't been our focus. It's really been dealing with the variance process, revising the plans, and besides the removal of the rock, the building to our southeast has a 30-foot wall that we don't want to destabilize, because that would then impact that building. So there's multiple rock related issues with this site.
And Daniel,
I appreciate your suggestion on the solar panels. Energy efficiency in all developments is going to be front and center. We just haven't gone there yet.
Right. I think it's more than Daniel suggested. It's once again and I don't remember which local law it is, but it's
93 or 94.
Yeah, requiring either solar panels or a green roofer. So basically, these are all sustainability, energy conservation, measures. So pretty certain that your building will need to comply with something. When my building, which is an existing building, redid the roof years ago, I mean, in addition to insulation, you probably now, could not do a dark colored roof. You need to do a lighter color roof to reflect. So, but once again, we're raising a lot of questions, which we typically do in, land use. But just to be clear, the Board of Standards and Appeals isn't going to discuss any of this. What they're going to look at is, what is the claimed hardship? Hardships plural. What are the 5 findings, and do you meet it? And just to repeat, because we talked about this last year, and I see it's coming up again, whether a buyer knows the rock is there or not isn't the question the Board of Standards and Appeals is asking. And I think some of us, know that. Their question is, did you create the hardship? And I believe they also asked whether the prior owner created the hardship. So for example, if you own the site and you created, and you had a gas station and you didn't maintain it and you had a major leak, and you're saying, well, now the site work, the excavation requires, a lot of handling of what's contaminated material. If you're responsible for the contamination, you're not entitled to, any relief. And if the prior owner did it, you're not entitled. But, the fact that there is a large rock outcropping, yes, it's visible, but once again, going back to, and I think in the past we've shared, listing what the findings are, knowing that the rock is there does not, make one ineligible for the waiver. Or the variance. However, what they will ask is, are you asking for the minimum required relief that's necessary for a financially feasible project? So if you are asking for more than the board believes is reasonable, they may cut you back.
You're absolutely correct. The D finding speaks to the mere purchase of a property does not constitute a self-created hardship. Mr. Benjamin, you should have come to my class and taught with me. Your explanations tonight are excellent.
Well, I mean, the land use committee has been, addressing BSA applications, I think I've been on the land use committee for 20 years. So many of these things come up over and over again, and there are a number of committee members who've been there. So, but I think it's important to remember, what the standards are, because in some cases we are creating our own standard and measuring it against that, which is fine. And we could write a resolution that says we don't like this. When it goes to the Board of Standards and Appeals, or when something goes to city planning, whatever, they're going to say, okay, our guidelines or the law says X, and your resolution doesn't speak to that at all, so we can't do anything with it. Or they're going to say the part of your resolution that speaks to the guidelines of the law, we can accommodate, and the part that is, not really asking questions that we can respond to, we have no jurisdiction to deal with. We have in the past, and this is taking too long, we have pointed out that there are other agencies that have jurisdiction, or we've pointed out that there are things the developer could do, and in addition to what we want them to do with BSA or HPD, to also concentrate on those. There's nothing that prevents us from doing that, but the Board of Standards and Appeals is going to look at what they're asking for. They're going to look at, the 5 findings that are required, by law. And, they've met with you 3 or 4 times. And I understand that this meeting in April is the last one. So
that is correct.
Either they will approve it or they won't. And you're going to get us the revised plans when?
Early next week, Frank? Early next week. Along with the geotech, with the economic analysis, the full application, the environmental review, you will have everything early next week. And that gives several weeks for the board to review before the BSA hearing. And if you have other questions, you know how to find me. I'll be more than happy to speak to you as the chair or a subcommittee of your committee if there's follow-up questions.
Okay. Final question from Steve, and then we're going to move on to our next agenda item. Steve?
Yeah, Richard, could you send us 2 sets of these documents? I think we should have one available for public inspection.
Well, Steve, if it's digital, we can post it as many places as we want.
Well, will it be digital?
Yes, it will be digital.
Oh, all right, very good. Then we should make
we can post it to the website, for reference.
We should do that. We should make it widely available to people in the community who are interested in this project.
Okay. So we will be looking forward to receiving that information. I think we get it before the executive committee meeting. Well, there is nothing necessarily that we need to vote on, but we've already passed the resolution. We can review the plans, and if there's something that we want to say in addition to that resolution based upon the revised plans, either at the executive committee meeting, we can do that, or the chair can take action in that, but we need to actually see the documents. And as I said, there are a number of committee members who were not here for the first presentation, so give them an opportunity to review the prior presentation, and also the resolution that Tanya mentioned, Daniel and Anthony. It outlines, I think, in some of the paragraphs, how the original project was structured, but we do have the presentation from last year.
Well, we'll also make it easy for you, Mr. Chair. We'll send you the before and after. So you don't have
Perfect.
to.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. We'll be looking forward to that. The next item on the agenda.
Mr. Chair, do you need us to hang on or we're done?
We don't need you to hang on, but you are quite welcome to stay. We are going to be talking about proposed designation of an existing building in Inwood, 101 Cooper Street. And leading that discussion is Lisa Rubenstein.
I would love to stay on, but I have 23 people coming for dinner tomorrow night. I have to go cook.
And you did not invite us, so you know.
I had to rearrange my entire house to seat these people. But next year, how's that?
Next year, very good.
Okay, be well, be safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy holiday, whatever you celebrate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lisa,
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
The floor or the screen is yours. And I just lost you.
Now you got me.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair Benjamin, for putting us in the last minute like this. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to talk tonight about our building, which is 101 Cooper Street. And we have been working with Councilmember Carmen De La Rosa on trying to preserve and protect the building. So I'm going to share my screen. I've prepared a presentation. Okay, let me just close this other stuff up here. All right, it's going to take me a little minute here to get this. So I have to get it exactly on that. Second. Okay. Did it. Great. Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. And put my glasses on. Okay, so this is 101 Cooper Street. And it was built by Robert Caro in 1937 and by architects Ginsberg and Associates. I'm wondering why this is not, there it is. Good. Okay. Let me just, I want to close this out. I'm seeing everyone here. I want to get rid of everyone. Okay, there we go. Okay, so 101 Cooper Street is a beautiful residential building adjacent the Good Shepherd Church, just outside the Good Shepherd School, and looks out on the greenery of Isham Street and the Inwood Farmers Market. This quiet block on Cooper Street evokes a past era when Tubby Hook became Inwood and all the buildings were just like this, affordable, well-built, spacious, and sunny, with a then modern, simple design that came to be known as Art Deco. We are the tenants of 101 Cooper Street. We live here. It is our home. We are the people the building was built for. We are families, seniors, singles, retirees, employees, roommates, and caregivers. Some of our tenants are longtime residents who have lived here for 50 years or more. Regardless of where we are in our lives or how long we've lived here, we all understood the uniqueness and magic of this building when we decided to sign our leases. We're asking for a designation as an individual landmark for the building's facade to preserve the beautiful exterior of colored brickwork and sandstone that frames the Art Deco style front doors, the original casement windows, the curved fire escapes, and the curved brick walls that hold the steel geometric enclosures for the garden in front of the building. The building was recently bought by a hedge fund corporation called Prana, based in San Francisco. They acquired many buildings in North Manhattan through a tax incentive program called the Opportunity Zone. They are a large portfolio owner and are one of the top 10 on the Public Advocate, Jermaine Williams' list of worst New York City landlords. They're planning to remove anything that can be removed, the original Art Deco front doors and the steel casement windows, to create major capital investments or MCIs to charge higher rents. All of this has been done under a shroud of secrecy. None of the tenants have been notified of their plans to do so. They've already begun Frankensteining, joining, and splitting apartments to remove the rent stabilized status of several affordable apartments. Clearly, we're just a row on a spreadsheet of passive income for their shareholders. But we are tenants and community members whose daily lives are impacted by these decisions. We are working with Council Member Carmen De La Rosa for a landmark designation. Located in the top of the island, Inwood is the most rural area of Manhattan, bordering Fort Tryon Park and Inwood Hill Park, where both the Harlem and Hudson rivers meet and form the estuary called Spuyten Duyvil. With the IRT completed in 1905 and the IND in 1925, the area was made accessible and available for building. Between the two world wars, buildings like ours went up everywhere in northern Manhattan, providing affordable housing for the influx of people from diverse cultures immigrating to the United States. The residential apartment houses started at the top of Manhattan and at the end of the subway line. As the demand for housing increased, more residential buildings were constructed far and wide in and amongst the natural land. In Inwood Park, there's a stone monument standing on the spot where in 1626, Peter Minuit purportedly bought Manhattan from the Lenni Lenape Indian tribe for goods worth about $25. The area was then called Chiracahpac, and the Lenni Lenape tribe was inhabiting the land. The Dykeman farmhouse around the corner from our building is a landmark that represents a time when the area's inhabitants were of Dutch descent, and Inwood was known as Tubby Hook. In the 1860s, the railroads were built, and the name was changed from Tubby Hook to Inwood. This building is a Depression-era building that is fully intact and is a perfect porthole into the history of the city between the world wars, and specifically northern Manhattan. We are looking for protection from the LPC to help preserve the integrity of this historically and architecturally significant residential building by Horace Ginsburg. It is through the preservation and restoration of these architectural elements that the history of this area will endure. The significance of this building is self-evident by its unhindered 360-degree viewability. All four sides of this building can always be seen from the street. It is a standout. It is impossible to imagine New York City without Art Deco. The skyline of skyscrapers has become the global symbol for New York City. The fact that this new architecture resonated with the city's designers, inspired by skyscrapers, and translated to residential apartments is something to commemorate. The Art Deco style of architecture got its name after the 1925 International Exhibition of Modern Decorative and Industrial Arts held in Paris. That was quite a mouthful for anyone describing a very pared down and sleek style, but it wasn't until 1966 that the term Art Deco was coined to describe the style when it appeared in a newspaper article written by Hilary Gelson for the Times London, describing that exhibition of 1925. There are many words that define the style of Art Deco. It is modern, it is streamlined, its architecture is minimalist and lean, without the ornamentation of previous eras. It is simple with planes and geometric patterning. Its decorative effects and ornamentation rely on the brickwork within the numerous planes. The brickwork is used to create visual interest, usually by alternating rows of light and dark bricks. Also, the placement of the brick alternates between vertical and horizontal, diagonal, zigzag patterns. Shadow is also incorporated into these design patterns, as some bricks are placed flat, widthwise, and others are placed lengthwise and depthwise, creating a 3D effect. Inspired by the verticality of skyscrapers, the brickwork first appeared in a striped pattern above and below the windows, spandrels, bringing the eye straight up to the top, which made the buildings appear very tall. As time went on, the brickwork included the space on either side of the windows and across the entire building at the top or the bottom. The newer horizontality, contrasted with the verticality of the architecture, began to herald in another modern style of the mid-20th century. Art Deco residential buildings also incorporated large entrances of the typical Midtown office building, again with simple materials such as brick and pigmented sandstone. The entrances of the New York City Art Deco buildings became one of the features that distinguish buildings within its genre. It is within these elaborate entryways that the ornamentation is incorporated into its architecture. Rounded, ribbed, shell-like walls on either side of the door, and often above the door, a relief or design cast into the sandstone. Symmetrical lighting fixtures on either side of these entrances were long and vertical and are to this day recognized as Art Deco lamps. Parapets are another Art Deco feature right up here. The parapet decorative wall sits at the top of the building's exterior to create an impression of height, much like the skyscrapers that inspired it. Fire escapes are a required feature. The fire escape for an Art Deco building is meant to blend with, even to enhance the building's design. It is painted in the color that is most prominent on the building's facade. Even as fire escapes were a requirement, designers would use them to their advantage, creating stylish features such as curved corners and horizontal or vertical patterning right here. Although we're concerned only with the facade of 101 Cooper Street for the landmark, it is worth mentioning that the lobby of an Art Deco building is an important characteristic. Lobbies are elaborate features within the minimal overall design. Often the walls are adorned with murals or mirrors incorporated in the design, or are ribbed and are painted with a color pattern. The floors of an Art Deco lobby are designed geometrically with marble and terrazzo. Again, to bring the eye up, there's a ceiling design, often a simple brick pattern that outlines the boundaries of the room and the lighting fixture in its center. There's often an electric fireplace that is prominently displayed to give the feeling of coming home. All of this is in here. And you can see checklist, everything that is required to call something an Art Deco building is there. Steel frame casement windows are an integral feature of the Art Deco style. The steel frame casement window originated at Bauhaus, as well as the steel frame corner casement window was used to allow a maximum amount of light and air to enter the building. These corner windows have an effect of a solarium, and before Art Deco were usually reserved for wealthier clients' buildings. The windows are an important feature of the Art Deco style and were seen all over northern Manhattan. Horace Ginsburg and Martin Fine built 101 Cooper Street in 1937. I'm sorry, you hear my dog coughing. 1937. During the Great Depression, using very humble materials and wonderful design. As head of Horace Ginsburg and Associates, Ginsburg is the man who was known for bringing Art Deco to the Bronx with Parkside Plaza Apartments and the Fish Building in 1931. Horace Ginsburg, originally Ginsburg, was born in Minsk, Russia in 1900. His family moved to New York when he was a child. He attended schools on the Lower East Side and then went on to graduate from Cooper Union and Columbia University as a student of architecture. Ginsburg went on to win many awards for his work, including the first American Institute Architects Award in 1939 for an apartment house listed in the Museum of Modern Art's walking tour as an outstanding example of contemporary apartment design. He won a plethora of awards for many of his apartment designs. His designs included Lincoln Plaza, the Harlem River houses, the Fish Building, and the Park Plaza apartments. Ginsburg is also known for his commercial chain designs, such as Chock Full of Nuts, the Hanscom Bake Shop, Browning, Fifth Avenue stores. He founded and was the trustee of the Building Industry League and was a member of the New York chapter of the AIA and the New York State Association of Architects. Horace Ginsburg designed his buildings to be more stylish and better than they had to be. Prolific but largely unknown outside of the architectural circles, Horace Ginsburg designed more than 500 buildings. He died in 1969. Martin Fine came to architecture in his mid-20s when he started working for the design firm of Cass Gilbert. Fine, like all his contemporaries, looked back to Europe and the Beaux-Arts for inspiration. While he was at Gilbert's office, Fine designed many gargoyles and other neo-European ornamental elements. He was very talented and he wanted to do more than just design things that reflected history. Consequently, he joined Horace Ginsburg's firm, where his first assignment was the Park Plaza in the Bronx. The vertical style of the skyscrapers built in Midtown Manhattan was the impetus for abandoning the neo-everything European style being built all over Manhattan. Fine found inspiration in Raymond Hood's Daily News building and William Van Allen's Chrysler building. Fine translated what he found exciting about these two buildings, their height and verticality, to the Park Plaza's modern apartment houses, utilizing the spaces between the windows, the spandrels, and the alternating brickwork on the facades to do so. Horace Ginsburg, meanwhile, was designing the living spaces with a minimalism and horizontal spaciousness that complemented Fine's vertical focused exteriors. Together, they truly created the modern residential building. Northern Manhattan has the largest concentration of Art Deco architecture, yet it is the most underrepresented neighborhood for landmark designated buildings. In the face of the current rezoning, it is incumbent upon us to preserve the many architectural treasures that exist, as they represent an important era for Inwood and all of Northern Manhattan. Currently in Inwood, there are a total of 5 designated landmarks. These are the Dyckman Farmhouse, the Cloisters, and 3 street lampposts. Rightly so, they are gorgeous. What started as an elaborate design style with, excuse me, much ornamentation. Sorry, I gotta get something. As in the Park Plaza, apartments and the Fish Building in the Bronx became leaner and minimal as we went through the Great Depression and the enormous influx of immigrants who needed housing. The style of architecture and architecture design of Art Deco was suited to the necessities of Depression-era frugality, quicker building, no added ornamentation, humble materials, and excellent design. Art Deco saved New York. Aside from the architectural significance, the Art Deco buildings in Northern Manhattan offer a rich history of social and cultural significance. Given the immigration between the wars, European Jews, Dominicans, and Irish, many of whom appreciated the modern architecture and still call this home. 101 Cooper Street is the epitome of all that is Art Deco, for its design and its specific historic period of a Depression-era America. Our building has every single distinctive feature and criterion that qualifies it, both architecturally and historically, as a significant monument deserving to remain intact, conserved, and protected, with the designation as an individual landmark. Positioned between the landmark district of Park Terrace and the Cloisters, 101 Cooper Street stands adjacent to the Good Shepherd Rectory. Although from different eras, the two buildings have an affinity with one another. Park Terrace, the Cloisters, and even the Inwood Rock. Within this diversity of styles, it is Inwood that emerges. This building is indeed akin to its surroundings. And now we have one thing. Go to the building. And This is the Naked City, 1948. Famous murder scene that takes place in the fire escape of an Art Deco building that looks exactly like 101 Cooper Street. In an interview about the scene, the director said that it was chosen because it was a very New York City apartment. There's our windows. That's it.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're quite welcome.
Steve, I see your hand up.
Yes, I want to commend Lisa for an excellent presentation and for taking the initiative on trying to get her building designated. Do I assume that you have submitted a request for evaluation to the LPC?
Yes, correct. I also, yes, I have, and I'm going to put into the chat box links to it and also links to our Tenants Voices letter and also our community letter where we've collected signatures and we've with council member De La Rosa, we've put together quite a bundle, a layered bundle of community members and tenants' voices, as well as local representatives as well. Thank you.
Well, I would be pleased to offer a motion in support of your application, and but I would also wanted to refer to the fact that that we believe that we have numerous other Art Deco buildings in Washington Heights and Inwood that also merit designation, and that probably what we should have is as what I believe Pat Courtney previously recommended, was that we have a district of Art Deco buildings.
Well,
in fact, I would Pat Courtney is on this call. I would like to hear from her as to whether this is one of the buildings that she studied and recommended.
Steve, before we go off too far, one of the things that we've discussed years ago when I shared that presentation with the entire land use committee is we in fact had a presentation from Pat and others under the HDC 6 to Celebrate that looked at preservation options in Inwood. But even predating that, when I first came on the community board, I believe the Audubon Partnership looked at an Inwood apartment house district. And the point that you made, and the point that is made in the presentation that we saw years ago is and 101 Cooper was in that presentation, but there are so many others. And, when in 2019, Landmarks finally came around and proposed a Park Terrace West on West 217th Street Historic District. One of the things that we said, and one of the things that many community residents said, is why such a small district when you have all of these wonderful apartment buildings, not all of which are Art Deco. So I mean, we should have a historic, apartment house district, but some are Art Deco, and some are other architectural styles, which do not mean they should not be considered. And so the question, I think one of the questions I raised in response to your email, Lisa, and it's something that I think the community board and Councilmember De La Rosa is, why just one building as opposed to, continuing to pursue an apartment house historic district?
I can speak to that. My sound is on. This building, because it's being threatened right now, and this was the only way that I could see being able to preserve and protect this building, was to be able to have to get the city behind it to protect it. I agree with you with regard to setting up, an RFE for maybe not necessarily just Art Deco, but I mean, you know, the diversity that is Inwood. There's a lot of different ways to go about this to get something. I think that Broadway corridor presentation that you sent to me was wonderful, beyond wonderful, and something that I would really love to work on. And I think that many, many more places need to be landmarked. But at this point, you know, this is the one, this is what came to me. This is how I learned about landmark. This is how I learned about reaching out to my community. This is the beginning of, this is the genesis of it for me. Was this building, was my experience of living here, of having everyday joy just from living in this building with these windows, and having someone come along who talk about self-hardship. This is the building you bought with these great windows, this great place, and wants to just take it all away. They just want to take it away. And we don't think that's right.
No, I mean, I as I said, the community board has been very interested in and very supportive of designations throughout the community. But, you know, I'd say two things. The LPC designation process, and Carmen knows this as well as Ruth, is unfortunately a long process. So if someone was intent on changing the windows, LPC is not going to move fast enough if they move at all. Although what I shared with you and others is, you know, you can get replacement casement windows. And, you know, what OC has pointed out is with all of the laws the city is passing, at some point, single pane steel frame windows are not going to be code compliant. And, you know, and the property owners get fined if they don't comply. And at some point, they're going to pass those fines on to the tenants. But the other thing you might want to look at that I think is really interesting model is the Grand Concourse District. And I think the Grand Concourse has a higher concentration of Art Deco than Inwood, but that district has Art Deco, Art Moderne, Art Nouveau, Renaissance Revival, Tudor Revival. It has multiple architectural styles in a single historic district, including, I think, the late 1950s, 1960s Executive Tower, which was cited, you know, for, you know, its architectural merit as well. And the intent of that, and I didn't know it, but the intent of Executive Tower was to stabilize what was becoming, you know, a South Bronx that was sliding down, and the intent of Executive Tower was to kind of stop that. But that is a very architecturally diverse historic district, which would probably be a very nice model for Inwood. And as I think Aisha pointed out, you're absolutely right, Aisha. Many of the same architects who designed buildings on the concourse design buildings in Inwood.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our Horace Ginsburg and Associates did, you know, did those buildings there, did the Parkside.
I see Carmen De La Rosa hands up.
Yes, I just wanted to first of all offer words of encouragement and gratitude to Lisa and the tenants at 101 Cooper. This is an important, as Lisa said, the impetus was the threat behind this building. And the way that I see it, I sit on the landmarks committee now in the council. And so I'm learning about the different tools that are disposal when it comes to preserving our community. And so I did see this as a beginning of a fight. And I know that Wayne, you were nice enough, Wayne, to send me an older presentation that had happened in the board. I am interested and curious and excited for the possibility of considering landmark.
You're fading out.
Landmarking, you know, districts in our community. And so I welcome this conversation with the. I think one of the things we had in mind with this specific building. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Let me see. Can't hear me. Okay, I turned off my camera. Hopefully that helps a little bit. So what I was saying
Yes.
is that I welcome the opportunity for us to engage in this conversation about how we can actually create these landmark districts in our community. And I'm learning this process as we go. I think that it would be important for the board to support maybe a resolution or a forward-looking resolution with those intentions and those sentiments, because I think in the case of 101 Cooper, the more noise and cohesion that we can make as a community to let these landlords, which is a private equity firm, I think Lisa mentioned, know that we are being watchful of the architectural and the historic preservation of our community. I think it adds value and weight to the case at the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And so I just wanted to offer words of encouragement and gratitude to the board and to Lisa and the tenants who have really taken it upon themselves to move this forward. It's a worthwhile cause, and I'm just excited to begin these conversations as a member of the Landmarks Committee.
Thank you. Actually, if Lisa, if you could forward a copy of the RFE, I don't know if you already said if you could forward a copy of that. I think Steve moved for the committee to pass a resolution supporting that, and we could certainly do that in principle, but having a copy of it will allow us to flesh out the resolution a bit more. OC.
Can I just say 1 second?
Sure.
I just added it. I just put it in the chat box. I've got the 3 documents. I've got the RFE, I've got the tenants' voices letter, and I've also got the community voice letter.
I think I had the latter too. Did you previously send an email with the RFE?
I did.
Okay, then I have it. Actually, then check your email, check your inboxes, committee members, because I forwarded all those documents to you. So you have it.
Okay, well, it's in the chat as well. So
yeah.
So.
OC?
Yeah, so a few things. One, I love those windows. I know they are not energy efficient, but those are awesome looking windows. Totally in support of what you're trying to do here. And I want to highlight something. If you look at, and I really don't know if you can add it to your application to LPC, if you can look at UNESCO designation of 3,000, I think it was 3,000 buildings that were designated in Tel Aviv in Israel. This is a Bauhaus style, completely different, but they fund the money to preserve those buildings, 3,000 of them in one city. So what I'm thinking of is just looking as just you mentioned and Wayne mentioned the same thing. It's just looking as a district of like, you know, a cluster of buildings that look the same and worth to preserve. And maybe you can borrow some language from what UNESCO did when they designated the buildings in Tel Aviv. I'm just putting it out, something to look into, but absolutely in support. That's what I want to say.
Thank you so much.
Vivian.
2 things. One, do you want letters from us? Because I saw even that your signature pages were not complete. And you know, the more people that write, the better. And the other point I just wanted to make is I know that he's not of the city, but I know that Espiat really wanted to do an Art Deco district, and to the extent that he has any connections, it might help. I mean, I don't know that he was so defined in terms of knowing what Art Deco actually is, but
yeah, but remember, Lori came to the committee, and once again, we were talking about, you know, we're not limiting it to Art Deco. You know, he would, even in his presentation, he showed images of buildings that were, for example, Tudor Revival. So it really wasn't so much an Art Deco district as it was a historic district of apartment houses. But that's my point and my concern, that on a number of occasions, we've had great deal of interest expressed by, you know, engaged community members. and then it seems to just kind of fall away. I mean, I think the land use committee would have been very supportive of listening to and passing a resolution supporting, the apartment house district, discussed in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. So let's not let that, fade away once again. Let's do it.
I mean, there's a higher standard for single buildings.
Exactly.
Landmarks, but this one may in fact do it.
Well, that's true. So they already have an RFE in there.
Right.
That doesn't mean, folks can also look at, doing a apartment house district. And there's no reason the apartment house district can't also include an individually designated building if it gets designated.
I think overlap is good. I do. I think more voices, more people, looking at it, awakening to it, I think it's good. And I also think just, people getting together, and really pushing this because, it's in their heart, that's going to make a very, very big difference.
Daniel.
Real quick, I thought that Lisa, I thought that presentation was really cool.
Thanks.
I also just thought, and everyone already kind of said it. I think it would be a good idea, instead of just doing it for one building, doing it for plenty, and having that whole discussion of a district of Art Deco buildings. And if so, I think it would be cool to look into all these other art buildings that you say that they are in the neighborhood, and kind of building up a coalition of that. So then it gives them even more validity. There's a person that already has all this information on all these buildings and all the historical backings to it. So then when it comes down to the point that maybe one day that we can have a Art Deco historical district in Uptown Manhattan, that the work is solid and based, and I don't know.
Oh, thank you. No, I that's something that I would really love to do. But at this point, I'm going to see this one through. I feel a sense of getting an ankle through the door somehow, a wedge, and then, en masse, we go.
And it'll be interesting to see what LPC's response is as well.
Also, you should know, I have contacted, all the different organizations that, the Historical District Council, and all the people who have highlighted our building in whatever it is that they're working on. So I've gotten in touch with them, and we're getting really terrific letters from architects, also from the curator of Horace Ginsburg's archival collection and things like that. We've got, loads of different authorities and organizations who are also writing in. And when I sent in the RFE, I was told leave it open, because I'm going to be continually adding signatures onto the community thing. And so I'm just adding that in as we go, and they can start. But I was told, get it done, get it in, add the rest, tell them you're keeping it open, and just keep going. So
Okay.
that's what I'm doing.
And Steve and OC and Daniel, you could put your hands down, but I also see from Daniel may have to leave soon. Steve, you made a motion for the community, for the land use committee to support the RFE for 101 Cooper Street as individual language. Is anyone seconding that?
I'll second.
So I would just like to vote on it, so before we lose Daniel, and we can continue talking. So
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Those in favor.
Okay, Wayne, can I just make it clear that the resolution would say that this would be a step towards creating an apartment house district for both Washington Heights and Inwood?
Yes, but remember, it would be Washington Heights and Inwood is a big area, so
Yes, well,
we would craft
more than one
appropriate
district.
language.
Right.
Those in favor, actually, say aye or.
Aye.
Aye.
Can I just have a clarification? As far as apartment houses versus Art Deco buildings, is there a distinction there?
Well, but what's actually on the table, Aisha, is the R fee for this individual building. And the discussion, I mean, this would be, I guess, the equivalent of what Steve mentioned would be it further resolved that we're encouraging LPC to consider the designation of apartment house, districts. I would not continue to use the term Art Deco because, as I said, that's limiting because technically some of the buildings may not be Art Deco, they might be Art Moderne, or they may be something else. And we don't want someone to say, well, you said Art Deco and that one isn't Art Deco, so we're not going to include it. But it's a historic, apartment house historic district.
Okay, thank you. Clear. And I support.
One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, 8, 9. So it's anyone opposed? Abstaining? So it carries. Thank you. So back to you, Aisha.
All right, have a good meeting, guys. Sorry that I had to leave at 9. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
So yeah.
Wait. I'm sorry. That's right. We don't have any other board members present. Members of the public who would like to vote on this. And let me pull up participants so I can see. You can raise your hand if you're in favor. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, if you could take your hands down. Any members of the public oppose or abstaining? So it's 9 committee members and 9 members of the public. Thank you for reminding me of that. Back to you, Aisha.
Yeah, so I was just saying I've been doing a lot of traveling around the city recently, and I went to a building on the Grand Concourse that has a circular entrance. It's right, the entrance to it is right on the corner. But walking into it, it was just like stepping into a completely different era. It was amazing. So now I've passed by 101 Cooper, but I've never walked in. I look forward to doing so. This has been a great presentation. I have 2 things. One is a question about the mechanics in regards to this building versus the, putting many buildings into a batch to create a district. If this building is landmark, does that affect putting it into that bigger bracket at a future time? Does it help creating that district?
If it's individually landmarked, that would not prevent it from being included in a historic district.
Okay. And so then my other thing is, so I went to the borough presidents, it's been a couple of years now, or a few years now, ULURP training. And in that they talked about landmarking. And I was shocked to find that we have so few. Especially considering the historical arc that is, in our community, both Washington Heights and Inwood. So tonight I've learned another reason that our community is unique, this Art Deco collective of buildings, for instance, and then of course, the historical context of, how, the beginning of Manhattan, the various representatives of government having lived here. Can we as a committee put together a list of other reasons that are unique to our district that makes it important to push forward more landmarks for our district, and possibly put forward a resolution to LPC that says, hey, we need some attention over here?
We actually did pass that resolution some time ago, but what you've just pointed out, all of that would, if you were doing an apartment house historic district, all of that, would be in there, And someone had in chat that, the landmarking process can get tied up in politics, which is absolutely correct. It's politics and social attitudes. And if you look at where there is a concentration of individually designated buildings and historic districts, being quite honest, it's not typically in communities of color. And it's not typically in communities that may not be, wealthier. And if you go back to, this is when Ruth Messenger was borough president, there was an exhibit put together by some folks in Harlem called Heritage on the Heights. And it was focusing on the very point that you made, Aisha, the lack of attention to buildings of architectural or, historical cultural merit by LPC. And in some cases, the building, I think the Beaumont is one example where the Beaumont on Riverside around 151st so has a twin on the Upper East Side, if I'm not mistaken. So the downtown building designed by the same architect, looking exactly the same, was designated. The Beaumont was not. The Beaumont is now designated, but, just as when we were talking about, 857 Riverside and attention to, abolitionists and, what it means to the community, LPC has not always been focused on, the equity of designation. It's a longer conversation.
Thank you.
Anthony.
So you had noted in your presentation and in the Tenants' Voices letter that the new development company, or I guess new owners, Prana, has started to institute or apply for MCIs. Do you know what some of those MCIs are, and are any of them in particular threatening the facade of the building?
It's a very good question. I thank you for asking. The point is that everything is done by rumor. They don't even think they have, not only do they have no respect for the building, but for the tenants as well. No one has been notified of anything. Everything is all rumor and it's all gaslighting, okay? So basically, when I first heard about that, I called them up myself and I asked them things. Because whenever I would write them an email, and they were going to lie, they wouldn't write it. They would call me up. I thought I'd save them some time and just call them right up and listen to the lies. And so, so we don't have anything. We are fighting like an imaginary, adversary. It's all been like this, like imaginary, like enemy, in doing all this and staying under the radar and trying to get this done without causing anything. I don't know how well we've done it, but that's the way we've been working. So we don't really have anything from them, and doubtful that they would give anything to us.
Yeah, but I mean, to that point, and to Anthony's, the point raised by Anthony and others, depending upon the building, but also depending upon the tenants. And I was having this conversation with someone in the supermarket the other day. Some tenants are more interested in, more involved in what's going on in terms of building project improvement than others. But, knowing that, doors and windows are things that, can be replaced, it would seem that the tenants, with the council rep and the borough president can approach or should approach the owners to talk about appropriate products, because the landmark process is going to take years. I mentioned that, for Audubon Park, it took 6 years and we were told that was fast. So, in 6 years, there's a lot that, can happen. But if, I would say the council member and the borough president probably will get a call returned faster than the tenant say, listen, this is a great building. We're interested in it. We're interested in you being a responsible, landlord, as I shared with you and with Carmen. there are insulated casement windows, and some of the companies I showed you have done them in landmark buildings. So they can't say they can't find casement windows that would meet it. So I mean, there are a number of things that can be brought to their attention. So as Carmen was saying, that they know it's being discussed, they know it's being watched, but also we're not just saying, you go figure it out. So here are 3 companies that do replacement windows, and they all have products that, are architecturally appropriate for the building. So instead of doing something that would ruin the building, do something that is architecturally appropriate that would also increase the level of comfort, because clearly insulated windows would be better than single pane. But, I think engaging them directly and letting them know that these are things of concern, because, the LPC can and will take a long time, and there's a lot that can happen in the interim.
Thank you. That's a really good point. Also, to the point of energy, I know that they have benchmarks with regard to, the energy efficiency. And it's not just windows, it's not just air escaping, it's not just that. There's a lot of things that go into it. There's like water usage, there's all sorts of, obviously you all know that. But so I went and I looked at some other buildings that had casement windows, and I found one on, I think it was West 88, no, it was 85th Street, and built windows just like ours, exactly, in an enormous building. And of course they had a rating of an A in their lobby. Yeah. So we can't say that it's the windows that make that. We have a D rating in ours. So people, and rightly so, people don't want to create a carbon footprint, and I'm right there with them, but you have to know what it is that's doing it, and not just.
Well, exactly. And some of that information is available online. But you're absolutely right. It's not just the windows. However, the way it's put, your windows are a big hole in your, facade. And so, once you work on, tuning up the boiler, making it more efficient, things like that, there are sort of retro commissioning things you could do, making sure windows close tightly or weather strip or whatever. But as OC has been pointing out, the city is passing a number of local laws, that, are requiring certain performance standards by 2030 and 2040 and 2050, and like lowering the carbon footprint. And, single pane windows are not as efficient as insulated windows. And when you talk about, the loss of, heat through just the frame itself. And I grew up in a building that originally was built with steel frame casement windows. And sometime, I think in the late 70s, so it was changed to aluminum. I mean, they get cold and they allow for the transfer of heat. So there are things that folks need to think about, but you're absolutely right. There are a lot of retro commissioning things that can be done to make the building more energy. I live in a building that's over 100 years old, and we have an A rating. We're like in the low 90s, but it's like making sure the boiler and the one pipe system and all that, everything's working as best as it can.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that this is an investment for these people. They don't want to, keep the building forever. They want to sell it within probably it's a 10-year.
But the building was originally built as an investment. So, I mean, let's not look at that, negatively, because unless you want to buy the building and run it as a, 100%, shareholder owned co-op like my building, someone is going to, be responsible for owning and maintaining the building. But folks need to say that, we're in this with you, and, we're watching what you're doing, and we're happy to do suggestions, but like, don't ignore us. And, clearly, I would think the elected officials are in a stronger position to, get their attention.
Very good. Yeah, I like that. That's something that I think is really important. There's no way that they would talk to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Aisha, is that an old hand or a new hand? And OC, is that an old hand or a new hand?
It's actually a new hand. Just a quick comment about the energy efficiency. Don't worry about the building grades at this point for the next few years, because building that suddenly jump to an A, probably move to natural gas, but that's not going to help them after 2030, or fudge the numbers. This is why, and like, this is why I think in 2026, the benchmarking will have to be submitted by engineering company, not individual buildings. I mean, because right now I can submit, our management can submit the numbers to the city. So some buildings suddenly, fudge the numbers. So yeah, that will go away. So don't worry about it too much.
Well, but I mean, the other thing to remember, and we're getting off topic, is actually I just took a 4-part course on complying with local law 97. And the interesting thing is the benchmarking uses Energy Star as the rating. However, local law 97 use carbon reduction. So the two don't agree with each other. So, you can have a building that legitimately has a good rating for Energy Star, but when you are asking, what are you doing to reduce your carbon footprint, that's a different measure. And that's the point, if you are, the more you have to heat the building because you're losing it through, windows, or you could cool it, that impacts the carbon footprint because you're using more fuel to do that. So it's one of these things, once again, the city has passed laws, but the laws are measuring things differently, which makes it, hard to comply. Well, not hard to comply, but it's like, I don't know how many people know that the benchmarking under local, I think it was 84, 87, and the carbon under 97 don't measure the same things. Just to make it more complicated.
Right, because the 84 is measuring water as well, and 97 does not at this point anyway.
Yeah, so it's, welcome to the fun game of compliance. Thank you so much. And is there anything further on this topic from my committee members? Is there any old business?
I'm going to say thank you very much to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And please keep us in the loop.
Yes, I certainly will. I don't know, before I leave, I just want to say, I don't know what that looks like, what we've done tonight. What does this look like? Is this going to be, you're signing?
The committee has passed a resolution, but the resolution is not official until the full board votes on it. So at the general meeting, the committee's resolution will be presented, and assuming the full board passes it, this resolution will be sent to the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and you'll be copied.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Is there any new business?
In old business, Stephen Littner, who's in the Q&A, has an item.
And what is that item in the Q&A?
Yeah, it's in regard to the development at 1 Bennett Avenue, 1 Bennett Park, 524 Fort Washington.
Okay. Where am I here?
Is there a Stephen Littner among the participants?
That is what I'm checking. Stephen, you should be able to speak.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. I'm just a community member. I live nearby. I live on 186th Street in Overlook Terrace. And I don't know much about the site that's being developed there. I know it was sold, and I was kind of alarmed when I saw that permits had been filed for like a big tall tower. I don't, and I just have no context. I'm just curious how one learns more information, how one fights that, what one does if they don't want to be cast into shadows because it's looks like it's going to be much taller than anything else in the nearby vicinity.
Well, yeah, we talked about that project a few months ago, and this is a project that, you know,
It's a long history, right?
has a long history. It died, and it, like The Walking Dead, came back to life.
Yeah.
But at that time, we had someone from city planning on the Zoom meeting with us. All of the information that everyone had was based upon, I think, some articles that were posted to the internet. There were no formal applications submitted to the building department or city planning at the time. So it was hard to tell, you know, other than the rendering, you know, what is proposed. That said, you know, if you were on the
and I didn't see any renderings in any articles.
Yeah.
I think I found that a permit application online with the city, but I'm not quite sure. I'd have to.
So, I mean, that's what I was getting to. I mean, we were talking earlier about the building on Cummings Street, and you know that building cannot be built as of right because of, you know, a number of things, and so they have to go to the Board of Standards and Appeals to request certain variances. However, any building in the city of New York, if the building complies with zoning, you know, you said, what can you do to fight? I mean, the property owners within their right to file plans, you know, with the building department. The building department is the arbiter of whether the building meets code and zoning, and get that, you know, approved. Once again, as we said in the last meeting, and this also applies to what we were saying regarding 101 Cooper, engaging with the borough president's office and the other elected officials to speak with the owners on what is proposed, and, you know, trying to shape the project so that it fits in the neighborhood better is the thing to do. But if it's an as of right building, meaning it fits code and it fits zoning, then there's no discretionary action that, for example, the community board has to vote on.
Gotcha. I saw a resolution from the community board, I think in 2011, 2012, opposing something that was happening at that time with the former building proposal. But so basically, and I mean, forgive me, this is my second community board meeting and my first land use committee meeting. So I'm very ignorant of these processes. No, but like, how does yeah, so basically it would be contacting your borough president's office and asking questions?
Well, I would say, I mean, let me back up. I mean, the community board could always pass, even though there may not be something that we are required to opine on, we can always pass a resolution saying, you know, we don't like this project. And well, not we don't like it, because, you know, whether you like it or not is less the issue of, here are the reasons why we think it's like inappropriate. We can also pass a resolution, say you didn't ask, but we think this is the best thing that you've ever done. But my point is, in terms of trying to shape a development project or a building where there are no discretionary actions that some city agency has to opine on, the way of doing that and going to politics is to try to engage the elected officials and, you know, work with them to try to engage the owner developer to see if they'll be responsive to community concerns.
Gotcha. Yeah, just, I mean, the height feels like it will put the neighborhood behind it in shadows, which is, you know, where my personal concern comes in. So, you know, it would be, so I think I get what next step should be for myself.
Okay.
I think, right, just like contact the borough president's office.
Well, and also, for example, your city council rep.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I also see a hand raised from, is that Tina?
Hi, yes, and you said that perfectly, which is very unusual. So you can all hear me, right? So
Yes.
I've been on this meeting before, and first of all, I just want to thank all of you and you, Mr. Benjamin, for your deep knowledge of these issues and for your dedication. I really appreciate it. Okay. Now, I am not an expert, but I have been on all those BS. I am talking about the coming Seaman building. Just for reference, I'm commenting on that. So I was on all the BSA meetings, hearings, and I have scrutinized the videos. And I believe I do understand that if no hardship is substantiated, and so far after 3 hearings, none has been substantiated, then even though the rock is unique, does not constitute hardship, that this is where we're at. And also in terms of what was mentioned by you, Mr. Benjamin, in terms of self-created hardships. So several commissioners have repeatedly stated that they consider any hardship experienced by the developer to be self-created, and that includes the very new chair, Shampa Chandra. So I just wanted to share my obsessive knowledge because I've looked at this so often. Also, because this building has no demonstrable, public benefit, as in a library or a school or some other facility, my understanding is also that you do not get an automatic pass on these hardship requirements. And I will cite Commissioner Otley Brown, who said, you don't get a hardship variance application granted just because, it would be nice.
Well, yeah, that's true. At the end of the day, and I think I mentioned this before, the commissioners will decide whether they feel the findings are met or not. What they have said in the past, is fine, but at the end of the day, they are going to vote the same way that we vote on things, up or down. So, but just to clarify once again, the Board of Standards and Appeals and its finding has nothing to do with whether, there are, public benefits, libraries, other things. That's kind of, mixing it. You can't say, well, I don't really have a hardship, but I'll give you something that you like and give you, but that's, maybe for rezoning, but for Board of Standards and Appeals, it's more strictly limited to, these are the findings, what are you asking for, and do you fit?
Right. So not to belabor this, but my understanding is that the library building on Broadway by Cumming was granted a variance at the BSA because, and
no, it was part of the rezoning.
Yeah. Okay.
It was part of the rezoning.
Thank you so much. So just to let you know, I mean, we feel that there is no hardship here. So
yeah, but once again, it's not something that the community board opines. It's not that we don't opine on it, but at the end of the day, the commissioners have the responsibility to say, if they agree the findings are met, and if they agree that what is being requested is the minimum amount. I mean, in any given project, there are going to be people who will always be against it. There'll be people who will always be for it. But at the end of the day, what is the standard against which the law or the code or the guidelines required to be measured?
Understood. And I can tell you so far they have not found that.
Well, once again, we will see what they do at their meeting later this month.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay.
You're quite welcome. I also see Kate London. Then what happened to Kate? Okay, we lost Kate. So Tanya.
And I have an old business. I'm sorry.
Yes. So back to old business.
Yeah, I just wanted to pose a question about what maybe we can get an update on what's happening with the Columbia property that when they cleared that whole block where Costides used to be. What's happening with that?
Is that old business or new business?
That's old, I believe, because we had a whole public hearing on it and everything, so.
Right, but
it's not-
old business, anyway, so we can certainly ask for an update. I mean,
yeah, old business, new business, whatever you want to classify it as. I would like to get an update on what's happening with that, because they displaced all these businesses and there's nothing happening there, or even a hint that something's going to be happening there. So, I would like to have them give an update on what's happening with that development. Second, I would like to say, in keeping with what we had discussed about coming, I don't know what you said that it's at the executive. I don't attend those because I can't speak. So if you could say for me that I think that one message we should get to the BSA is that they have not spoken to the public, to the community residents around that area. And that's a reservation that, that is, not acceptable in some way, to say that that was something that been asked of them and they have not done that. And if that could be emphasized to them, I think that would be, helpful.
okay.
But if you can relay that at the executive and say that that's, whatever, if there's a letter that's going to be sent, I don't know what's going to happen, because I don't think we really, I think it wasn't really clear. But whatever it is, the message is going to get to BSA. That's something that I'm requesting. I don't know if any community members agree, but I just personally, they did not do that, and we did ask them that long before. They still haven't done it, and many opportunities to do so. So
and I could certainly share that with the executive committee. The interesting thing is, however, because we've heard from, in some cases, board members that BSA requested the applicants to do certain things. I mean, we were told in spring of last year that the BSA requested the applicants to meet with us either over the summer or before September. When I reached out to BSA directly, they said no such thing. And I asked them about, their requests for meaning BSA's, requests for the applicant to get community input, whatever. And they said they did not do that. They did put in writing that the commissioner specifically requested based on all of the comments from community and the board, to present the revised plan to us. So what I'm getting at is, we need to be, or try to get BSA on the same page with us. Because if we're saying in the resolution, we want them to do one thing, and BSA, on the other hand, is saying, well, we're not passing that along, that's problematic.
Thanks.
Steve?
Yeah, I want to make two comments following up on what the issue that Mr. Littner raised about 524 Fort Washington Avenue. And we haven't seen a rendering of this proposed project in maybe a dozen years, at least 10 years, who knows. And now that there's a new developer, and the developer has purchased the adjacent site where the synagogue stood, maybe the project has undergone some changes. I think we have at least a right to know what's being built in the community, and I think we should reach out to these developers again, ask them to make a presentation to our committee, and ask the borough president and the council members to intercede on our behalf to reiterate that request.
Yeah, I think that's the conversation we had a few months ago, Steve.
Yeah, well,
and there was, as I pointed out, a rendering from one of these online publications that was shared, and it was like this massive building. So we did see an image that was dramatically different than the prior project. I'm not saying it was at all an improvement, but it was dramatically different. I don't know if the office has made any progress in getting a response from the owners at all.
All right, well, could we ask them to try again and then ask the borough.
Well, we can certainly do that. And the other
The
thing,
council members will also help with that effort.
yeah, but the other thing I recall is at that time we were speaking with, the city planning reps who at that time, once again, had not seen anything or had any conversations. And once again, some of this online stuff, you don't know how accurate, it is. So the project, that rendering was something that, city planning said it wasn't presented to them. Nothing was presented to them, regarding a new project. So we were asking them to confirm zoning calculations and dents, and they said they don't have a real project to look at that time.
Right.
So
Well,
we can find out.
it's not going to go before them because there's no zoning variance being requested or any other issue.
Yeah, but they can still pull information and see, we were asking them if the zoning calculations, if something has been submitted to the building department, which will look at the zoning envelope, that information should be available to city planning to look at.
Well, couldn't we just couldn't we go directly to the building department and ask them to share the plans with us?
Steve, do we have a reliable contact with the building department to do that?
Yes, we can.
Who's that?
I believe her name is Ophelia Phipps.
So we need to get that person. We know that we have a point person to speak with at city planning. If we have a point person to speak with at the building department, then we can do that. We can also go online, the building department site, to see what, if anything, has been filed. And any one of us can do that because that's publicly available information.
And if you still have a copy of that rendering,
no, I don't have it. It was someone shared it in chat. Although I'm pretty certain that if you were to Google, the address or whatever, we could probably see the same image.
All right. Well, we'll try that. But I think this is still a legitimate topic of discussion for our committee.
Is there anything else under old or new business? Okay, is there at 9:35 p.m. a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Okay, Kate London put her hand back up.
Kate?
Hi. Yes, I'll be quick. I know it's time to end. I wanted to say thank you to you, Mr. Chair, and everyone for all their hard work on the repeated hard work on the Cumming Street and Seaman Avenue project. My question relates to what Tanya mentioned earlier. I'm concerned that we're going to receive the thorough information from the developer this week. And then the developer is scheduled to be at the BSA April 24, 25. And I don't know that there's opportunity for the community board to gather and reiterate to the BSA our your previous recommendation to decline the variation, or to have had a chance to look at it and form an opinion before the BSA meets.
Well, I mean, the community board or the representative of the community board, the district manager or one of the officers can attend the BSA public hearing, but also, as I mentioned, and we've done this in the past when it's time sensitive, the executive committee can consider and pass a resolution, or if it's even more time sensitive, the chair of the board can, consider and pass something. And for one of the previous BSA hearings on this, we basically just reiterated to BSA that we passed a resolution that listed these things. To our knowledge, we have not been presented with any documents to show that those concerns were addressed. So our opinion of the project, as outlined in the resolution, stands. And that was, the that was the opinion of the board at that time.
Mhm.
You know, now, you know, arguably, it could and should be something different, because once again, if we're looking at the before and after, if we were complaining about the fact that there was no parking and now there are, you know, nearly 50 spaces, if we're saying it was a 10-story building. So things have changed, and we at least have documentation. So we can say there are some things that have changed, so they have been addressed, and there are other things that have not been changed. But, you know, we have the ability to do that. And today's only the 4th. The executive committee will not meet for another couple of weeks. And, you know, as Jim Berlin, our parliamentarian, will point out, if it's time sensitive, the chair could also do it on behalf of the board. So we do have the ability to address it. And affordability is not something, and I keep going through this, affordability is not something that the BSA is going to address. And I used to say this years ago, but I mean, we don't want to go to the Department of Housing Preservation and Development and ask them about things that are the responsibility or under the purview of Department of Sanitation. So, you know,
I understand that completely.
I'm just saying,
understand that completely. I'm talking about just the building.
No, I was actually responding to something in chat.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I thought you were still responding to me.
You know, the Board of Standards and Appeal is going to look at what is requested in terms of the, you know, variance, what level of relief does it meet the findings. And, you know, if we start, you know, before we're talking about the mechanical and electrical building systems, the Board of Standards and Appeal is not going to, they have no authority to look at that. And we're talking about the affordability, they have no authority, although, as I said, you know, if it is a function of, you know, sort of city government, that if the developers went to a city or state agency to get, you know, subsidy funds, and that changes the financial picture, BSA will say that is a self-imposed hardship. And if it's impacting your project, then, you know, that's not our problem. So that's something I think internally the city needs to, you know, fix, because to me, that doesn't make sense.
Right. It sounded like if they were building as of right, they'd have to consider affordability, but because of the variance.
Well, no, if they're building as of right, they would not have to consider affordability, but they could. But because they're going for BSA, and one of the things BSA looks at is what's the financial picture, bringing in the affordability, which would lower, you know, the rent, so to speak. It would lower the income that will be generated, and that impacts the feasibility. So you would say, if I'm going to have a lower income stream, I would need more density to make up for that. They're going to say, no, too bad, that's your problem, because you imposed the affordability on the project. That was not something you had to do. Understood.
Well, I appreciate knowing that the board has time to consider the matter. And my major issue with that is the height variance. I think it's still 3 stories out of line. So I appreciate you hearing me out, and I appreciate all your hard work. And thank you very much.
You are quite welcome. So we had a motion to adjourn that was made in second. Is there anything further? If not, at 9:42, the meeting is adjourned. Take care.